All right, I said a lot in those posts there, and I don't know if it makes sense, and I wanted to try and explain it. Um, it has a lot to do with subjectivity and objectivity, and what those words mean, and how we use them really. Um, like where the word objective came from and what it means. Like if something's objective, it means you can know what it is without any interference, without any bias, and in other words, you have a view of it from nowhere, everywhere at once, in a sense, because you're not viewing it from your perspective, you're viewing it from God's perspective, basically. In other words, you're God as the creator of what you're looking at. You're separate from it, so that it's objective to you. Now, subjectivity would be what's inside the creation itself. And I'm not saying I necessarily believe in God. I don't want to start that kind of argument. Although we could if you want to. That would be an interesting conversation. But supposing that there is a God, I mean that's the whole Western Judeo-Christian tradition is based on the idea that some creative spirit breathed life into matter, into the mud, and created life and human consciousness. So it all came from outside, in other words. And I think that's been carried down all the way to science and the way that science thinks it does have a view from nowhere, and then it can be objective and find the objective facts about the objective, independent, external world. And to a large part, it finds these regular patterns and stuff, and it's an amazing art in that sense because it's really not only can we observe the world, but we can create these technologies to create the world that manipulate matter and nature in a way that we never would have fathomed before and do these amazing things. Some of them destructive, terribly destructive, and some of them very helpful. But so the whole Western worldview is based on this idea of being separate from the world that you can then judge, and that would be the objective world. That's the objective way. But subjectively, none of this is separate. The painting is not separate from the person viewing the painting. The reader is not separate from the words on the page. In other words, in the case of text, after a book has been written, say a novel's been written, and all these pages have all these words on them that the author intended very specific meanings for, but then it gets shipped to the bookstore and I buy it and then I come home and read it, and the meanings that I assign to those words are going to be the meanings that I have associated them with. And I've noticed that this with just my own reading. When I read a book 2 years ago, and then I read again today, I'm finding new connections, new patterns, new meanings for the words that are there. Same words that 2 years ago I didn't even really understand in the same way at all, that now all of a sudden connect these other ideas and mean so much more than they did. And so, there's a lot going for the idea that we can never transcend this subjectiveness, and we can never get outside of our own perspective. We can never know anything objectively, because to know something objectively is basically the same monotheistic religious metaphysic. Instead of saying, oh, it's God creating the world outside himself, it's the ego creating the objective world out there. So instead of there being one God, we're not a monotheism anymore. We're a democracy, supposedly, at least in theory. And every individual has, a discrete, responsible self, an ego that makes decisions and is generally taught to be a law-abiding citizen. And so we still have the same basic worldview. It's not external to us anymore. It's now I'm God. I'm the ego. I'm the separate observer that can make laws about what the world is. I can take a perspective on the world. and then I can assume that it's the right perspective. But as far as this all relates to what I was trying to say, first of all, is elitism. I don't really have a problem with elitism. That just means it's more refined, and it's more it's coming from people that are more trained and more of experts in whatever it is that they're elites at. I mean, it seems like a bad word, I guess, when you're talking about it politically. I hate political elites too, because they have no reason to be elites. But when there's specialists in whatever field, or really good artists, or good artists, I don't know what that means. Really dynamic artists are they're really the fuck was I gonna say? They're elites. That's what I was gonna say. They're really elites. I mean, that's a different thing, though. They're elites for a reason. They're elites because they deserve to be elites. And I know I wasn't really trying to define art. I don't ever want to seem like I'm trying to define anything. I don't know definitions. There's a dictionary on my bookshelf, and I can read them, the definitions, if we want to do that game. But I don't like that game. I'd rather make shit up myself. And I mean, I don't mean that in the sense that I just want to spout bullshit on here, but what's the fun in looking up the answers in a book? I mean, if it's about politics or something, but we're talking about art. So yeah, I don't want to define art as a subjective appreciation, so that anything could be art. I'm not defining it as that. I'm just saying that that's a necessary element of there being an artistic occurrence of any kind, whether it's the objective painting itself or the subjective mind enjoying it. That whole experience together, the object and the subject, not even making an interpretation on which way it is, just the whole gestalt, or the whole context of that, requires that there is an appreciation or an awareness of the work itself. And I asked, do you think it takes an artist to appreciate art? And that's really what I mean by, if there's a God, then obviously nature is God's creation, and it's a work of art. And it certainly looks like nature is a work of art if you really just admire it. It's an amazing creation. It seems to be a creation. But then, okay, if we don't believe in God, and we say, no, there is no God, there's only me, I think, therefore I am, there's only this ego, then doesn't the ego that wants to consider the world an artistic creation, or a beautiful expression, if someone sees beauty in nature, they're saying it's art, I think. And does that require that we put ourselves in the position of God or of its creators? Because we're saying, wow, I understand this whole place, and it's beautiful, you know? And if that's true, that we do assume that we're God, then, or we're creating the world, we're creating nature, we're creating its beauty, which is really, I mean, beauty is the easiest kind of meaning to have, or the easiest proof that there is a meaning and a purpose to the universe, because there's beauty in it. And beauty must be for somebody, right? It's not just an accident. And if it is an accident, that's even more beautiful and more amazing, because then there's beauty and it's perfectly purposeless and just spontaneous, So yeah, I think that sums it up. Hopefully I made sense and explained what I was trying to say on the post there, but yeah, thanks for listening.